System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Tuesday, February 24th. I'm Amin TMK alongside Amoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Amoja, hello. Happy Tuesday. How are you doing, my friend?
Man, it's cold than a bitch in D.C. right now, man. Woof.
Man, that's a fact. Let's dive into some geopolitics, shall we? Of course, it's not peacetime anymore. It was a fun time when it was peacetime, but it's not.
Damn it.
We've been reporting on this on Inner City Left for the last 2 weeks, but I think it's time to discuss it. This is a video for our podcast listeners of Israel spraying chemicals on crops in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Some reports indicate that glyphosate was applied at hazardous levels in southern Lebanon, resulting in soil infertility and jeopardizing food security. Like I said, we've been reporting on this for a few weeks. Obviously, chemical weapons that I thought that was a war crime. You know what I'm saying? Because if you remember, my friend, there was a leader in Syria named Bashar Assad, and they said that he used chemical weapons. I don't believe that he did, and there's much proof to show that he wasn't. But they looked at Assad as an authoritarian, as a killer of his own people. But now, my friend, you know how we always talk about when it's you doing it, you project, a lot of projecting. And it looks like Israel is the one that's using chemical warfare. What are your thoughts on this? Have you heard about this? And what's your response? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, this goes back to the game that the West always plays with the definitions, right? What counts as chemical warfare? What doesn't count? Running up to the line of, well, this isn't technically an act of war, right? It's just chemical. It's unfortunate because it goes to the lack of humanity that we talk about sometimes that you see from the West. Everyone should be able to agree chemical weapons are not allowed. That's not something that we want to use in war. Again, this is why we say war is the worst thing that humans do. I think there's a pattern of this that goes all the way. This is what the West does, right? You can go back to the Americans in the Iraq wars, dropping things like white phosphorus. Again, using it as an incendiary, right, as opposed to a chemical weapon. What the West does is they just play with the words. They play with the names of these things, and they don't label them as such, even though they're being utilized in such a way that anyone else that was dispassionately looking at the situation would say, oh, yeah, no, this is absolutely what's happening. So with Assad, oh, this is what he did, right? But this is the same culture that, again, is dropping white phosphorus on human beings that are resisting, right, in Iraq. The same people that dropped Agent Orange and napalm in Vietnam, right? And this is what happens, right? This is what Huckabee was talking about. He's like, there's nothing you can accuse the Israelis of that we haven't done. There are several senators that have said that. And this is a big part of why no one wants to push back on what Israel does. And so the line gets further and further. But again, this is just the history of Western war. This goes all the way back to the Roman Empire salting the Carthaginian fields to make sure that the culture of Carthage would never rise again to resist Roman supremacy, So these are the kind of things that just happen in the West, and they'll never be labeled as such. And they'll say that they're against people that use these weapons, but they use these weapons. And this is a great example of that. Ask yourself, why is Israel spraying anything on Lebanon, on Syria, on Gaza? These are not areas that fall under even the United Nations mandate of what exists as Israel. You can be for Israel all day long, right? But then you have to acknowledge there's places that are not Israel. And yet Israel seems to operate in those places like it is. We go to war to protect their right to do these kind of things. But I think we all would understand if the Syrian Air Force was spraying glyphosate, right, on this area in Israel. You know, that would be a problem. I want to say one more thing about this. Um, as a Jewish person, it reminds me of a story with like King Solomon, where there were two women that came to him with a baby and saying, "Oh, this is my baby." The other woman's baby had passed, you know, and Solomon's like, "All right, well, I'll cut the baby in half." You know, and the mother of the baby's like, "No, no, no, give her the baby," right? This is such an instructive Jewish thing. Like, that you grow up with thinking about, because that's where we are in the Levant right now. There are two people arguing about a baby, and one of the people is saying, "No, cut the baby in half." And that those people are the Israelis that live there. Like, what are the point of these stories, right? If we don't even, and this is why, again, you have to separate what the difference is between being a Zionist and being Jewish, because Jewish people are all appalled to watch glyphosate sprayed all over the Holy Land, right? All over the Levant, right? But Zionists feel like it's their destiny and it's their noble right.
Yeah, it reminds me of what American settlers did to the open plains, and during the times of genocide from the indigenous. I mean, it got populations of bison and stuff that's still trying to recover from those times. We know Israelis poisoned the wells, destroyed olive trees, a huge part of Palestinian commerce and exports, and a point of pride and culture for the Palestinians. And Lebanon and Syria, just all the same to them. Israel's bombed 9 countries, right, last year, and they're already working on more, and they're already pushing the war in Iran as much as possible. And I think this just kind of goes to the idea of, like, when you allow a genocidal regime, which is what the Netanyahu cabinet is, right? A genocidal regime. Remember, now's not the time for elections, man.
This is what they say. This is not what we say. When they say, "Do to them as the children of Amalek," right? As a Jewish person, I understand exactly what that means, because the children of Amalek were wiped out. Men, women, children, the goats, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are games that you can play if you don't understand what they're saying and the symbology that they're invoking. So, like, to me, it's not controversial, because this is exactly what Yoav Gallant specifically said he wanted to do. Language that's been echoed by people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and executed by people like Bibi Netanyahu, which is why I refuse to play the game where it's like, "Oh, this is Bibi, he's out of control," right? They like to do that in America. "Oh, this is just Trump, he's out of control."
Yeah, let's play this. Just get your thoughts. This was on CNN.
And not say Iran. Should the world tolerate you having nuclear weapons and not say Iran?
First, again, we never admitted to have such weapons, but the very comparison is, I must say, it's very insulting, and I tell you why. We suffered one Holocaust. We listened to our neighbors.
Is it because of the Holocaust that you should be allowed to have nuclear weapons?
You know what? This interview was finished now. Your attitude is so hostile, and your questions are so arrogant. I don't want to speak.
Is it the case
anymore.
that...
So, interview is over.
This interview is over.
Yeah, I mean, and it just goes back to, like, you cannot push back in any way. You can't. I mean, again, we talk about Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East, which of course is ridiculous. But they have not had an election, and Netanyahu is just able to kind of move how he wants to move. And now, anytime you question any narrative, any aspect of the genocide that is being carried out upon the people of Palestine, they're offended. Just the very thought of the question offends me. Again, not even acknowledging that they have a nuclear weapon, which everybody knows that they do. Why are we even continuing to go back and forth on one of Israel has
it?
You
know what I'm saying? It's against the law for them to admit it. But let's not. So first off, it's incorrect. There are people that have admitted it. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu has admitted it. You know what I'm saying? He has admitted. And that in and of itself, there is a law on the books that says any country that has nuclear weapons that is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the United States is forbidden to sell them arms, right? So they have to do the song and dance, even though there are Israelis that have admitted it. And apparently even Mike Huckabee, when confronted by Tucker Carlson, seemed to not deny this thing. Let's acknowledge the fact that we're about to take World War III from a Cold War to a hot war as soon as possible. By all accounts, it looks like all of the pieces are in place. We're about to get the State of the Union. I would be amazed if this doesn't happen quite soon, you know. All of the aircraft carriers are arrayed. They've begun removing non-essential people from the ambassadorships and the state American embassies. In Lebanon, troops are being removed from Syria. You know what I'm saying? And all of this could be avoided right now. Iran would 100% agree to any deal that allows the United Nations to go through and audit the Israeli systems, right? Put them under the same level of scrutiny, and it would never happen. It's important to acknowledge and remember that Israel is not a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. As such, they are not investigated by any of those UN bodies, and so that the implications of that are huge, right? It's always do as we say, not as we do, no matter what the law is, because everyone acknowledges that Iran was meeting the letter of their obligations by what they were obligated to do by the rules of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. There were people investigating, and observing the Iranian nuclear process up until the point they were bombed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these are the kind of things that really threaten the whole viability of it. And now we're at a point where France and Britain are talking about providing nuclear material, right, to Ukraine. So once again, like these are the kind of, and even the Russians have spoken about this. Like, what is the point? Like the United Nations NPT, the whole framework of that is being destroyed by simply the West doing what they choose to do and forcing everyone else to play by even more than the letter of the law, right? By the intent of what they want it to be, right? This is an unsustainable situation. Iran is a nation of 90 million and they have some means of defense, right? What that will look like, should it actually go to a hot war, no one fully knows. But there are all types of estimates that this is not good. As it stands, there are members in the Joint Chiefs of Staff that are warning the Americans, like, this is not going to go the way you want it to go. You know what I'm saying? And you got to remember, the Joint Chief of Staff is the highest military position that speaks and collaborates with the Secretary of War. Used to be the Secretary of Defense. Colin Powell at one time was the Joint Chief of Staff, right? The Pentagon is pushing back hard because it's their job to think about the long-term health of the nation, the national security, right? They don't have to think about elections and, bases, and they don't have to think about donors or any of those things, right? And so it's their ass on the line. And they're pushing back. And yet, it looks like we're going to move forward. Again, all win if we had an opportunity for real negotiation as opposed to ultimatums and dictating terms, right? This could be circumvented, and it just does not look like that's going to happen.
Okay. It's so good because, like you said, the Trump bad. Trump is so bad. He's so bad, dude. And like everyone else is good, man. Like if we didn't have Trump, everything would be good, bro. And I just want to, it's like I'm just tired of people trying to act like the Democrats are just as bad or that the Democrats want war in the same way that Trump wants war. This is I don't know who this guy's name is. He's Democratic senator. They're going to show his name in a second, and I'll try to.
Well, look, what I would like to see.
Yeah, this is Jared. Maybe you can help me here. Makowicz, maybe. I don't want to make any major decisions on where this person's political leaning is based off their last name because I'm not anti-Semitic and I'm not a racist. But this is Jared Moskowitz, okay? And Democrat. He's going to be talking to you a little bit about what's going on with his feelings on it on.
Well, look, what I would like to see actually is a little tougher language coming out of the Trump administration. I'm to the right of this issue to the J.D. Vance Witkoff
they often
approach,
are.
and I agree, quite frankly, more with Senator Lindsey Graham and probably Senator Tom Cotton. Iran is the weakest they've been in a period of time. Now is not the time to appease them. Now is the time to put maximum pressure on them and make sure that we dismantle the nuclear program.
So, again, I think it's just good that we have Democrats that disagree with Donald Trump. They think he's not doing enough. And this just goes back again. And we showed
AOC.
Jasmine Crockett just a little bit. And AOC, and who else can you throw in there? I mean, look, if you have a D by your name, D means demon. And
Demon,
it means
demon.
don't vote for me. Don't vote for me. We have lots of great third-party candidates. I hope everyone goes out there and does their own research on their third-party candidates because the Democrats are not the ones to help us move through this anti-war movement that we're trying to create.
I would just like to say that Moskowitz is not a Semitic word. It is not it sounds a little Yiddish, but it is not, inherently Semitic. But, that notwithstanding, this is what we're left with the Democrats often, right? They're attacking the Republicans from the right. There is no effective, true anti-war movement in the Democratic Party right now. You can't even begin to pretend with AOC when she does everything but. She's like, oh, the regime in Iran must go. Human rights. But I'm against the war. That's not being against the war, right? That's as performative as it gets. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the reality. The Democrats are not going to threaten too much because here's the thing. To the Democrats, Trump represents a perfect opportunity. They are beholden to the same donors that Trump is beholden to. But they understand, just like the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, that this attack is fraught with all kinds of danger, right? And if it goes bad, it's on Trump. We didn't authorize this war. We didn't tell him to do it, right? So all you're hearing from the Democrats, everyone in the House and the Senate right now, essentially, is quiet complicity. They want Iran attacked. They think Iran is weak. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But the thing is, they don't have any real intelligence on the ground because all of their links thus far, the Starlinks and all of those moles, that's the people that were being dealt with during this whole interrogation that's happened within the last month. That was meant to be a little coup from the inside, and that's why we were going to go to war much quicker. And then that was dealt with, so they didn't have the moles, all of the trickery ways that the war was supposed to take place and make it much easier, that's gone. So now it's going to be a straight up fist fight, and you're going to get hit too. And it's just foolish to assume that a nation of 90 million is not capable of producing some level of pain for the average American. And that's their whole strategy, as it seems right now. Cause enough pain to force the Americans to back down. What we're seeing, even with this armada, by way of conventional weapons, it just doesn't seem like they're going to be able to meet the goals that they're saying they're going to. The Iranian government is incredibly redundant. right? Like that, I don't think that's something that Americans understand. They think that there's just a Ayatollah somewhere, and he's in a mosque, handing down orders, like a king. Like their government is incredibly. It goes all the way back to the Sassanid Empire, which again most Americans have never even heard of. Like the Persian way of government is so damn efficient that Alexander the Great, once upon a time, borrowed this system. Right? This is the culture that, like, it's just foolish how little Americans understand about Persian society and the assumptions that they make. But the reality is, when the rubber hits the road, once the guns start blazing, everything is go. And no one really knows what will happen at that point. All we know is Iran has sworn to defend itself viciously. And we'll see what that means.
People mention Persia a lot, but Iran is a Muslim country, and that's really where their culture moves through now at this point. And I think, this is the holy month of Ramadan, and I think Muslims are often more connected, just during this month. I know I am specifically. And I think, it's important to acknowledge that they do have this is a religious war in many ways for them, especially when you talk about, several indications from so many officials in the United States that they want to assassinate Khomeini. That's just an unbelievable thing to say, regardless if it happens or not, which I don't think it will, but it could. That is a huge issue for most Iranians, just on a faith base. So again, you already mentioned it, several contingencies. We've mentioned this on Inner City Left. Again, you can take everything I say with a grain of salt. Their technology has been drastically improved since their war with Israel last year. China and Russia have continued, in my opinion, to help boost not necessarily their equipment, but their software, making things more precise, making things more user friendly. And again, the Chinese have an incredible system. Russia has helped, but China has an incredible system. And I think that again, while there's not going to be boots on the ground or those types of things, China and Iran are certainly there for Iran. And I think that again, I think there is some sort of conversation that is happening surrounding, what to do, because we have to do something, right? Like we brought all of these aircraft carriers. We have all of this military buildup.
He's trapped.
And you heard Pete Hegseth talk about this in remember the little group chat that they had last year that got, they got picked up, where they're like, maybe we shouldn't go to a war in Iran. And I think that's really what the military strategy is. If you're not looking for a full-scale war, full-scale invasion, it's really difficult for you to try to engage with Iran right now. So we'll see what happens, but it does seem like a lot of military there.
You bring up a great point about the potential for Chinese software, right? India sells you weapons, right? You want to go buy some artillery or some tanks, even some planes. India sells them, Russia also, but less so. Russia, not as much as China, but China right now, more than any other nation in the world, except perhaps the United States, they don't sell weapons. They sell systems. You know what I'm saying? Like all that shit is online. All that shit is plugged in. And this is why the Pakistani Air Force was able to have such an incredible performance against the Indian Air Force last year. They were using Chinese software, anti-air, and all of their assets are tied in, right? So the anti-air system is tied into the radar, is tied into the planes, is tied into the people on the ground, right? It is a complete battle suite. So even before things are coming into visual view, if you'll remember in the Pakistani war, the J-10s, which were the planes from China, were tracking down the Dassaults out of France and shooting them out of the sky 110 miles away. That is not even in visual range. That is beyond radar range. But yet, because of other systems that the Chinese had sold, once they were picked up on one system, that information is relayed to all of the systems, and then the fighters are able to fire from wherever they are with an accurate lock on where the offending bogeys would be. If the Chinese have helped the Iranians, as it is suggested by many, then the Americans will be facing the most sophisticated anti-air suite that they've ever flown against. That's in the history of the United States. So these are not small considerations, right? This probably will not be like Venezuela, where the Americans just drop down a team and pick up a dude and get him out. You know, Iran, as infiltrated as it is, does not appear to be nearly as infiltrated as the Venezuelans were. But again, only time will tell. And it seems like we're going to be learning soon, one way or the other. This should all be resolved quite soon as to whether or not the hostilities will begin and what that's going to look like.
There's already reports of a Danish citizen in air quotes, trying to get through Iranian security.
Smuggled in Starlink, got his ass caught. Yeah. They're not fucking around anymore, man. Like, the Russians showed them how to signal lock on and that's to your point, right? That's tech they learned from the Russians. How to like block that, how to isolate the Starlink signals, right? How to utilize who is using those, how to aggregate that data, and then how to deal with the people that are now assumed clearly to be molds. Because this is the Western tech they're smuggling in for dissension. And even, yeah, that guy was an ambassador. So again, right, even the Dutch are trying to run ops. It's hard to believe that they're working on their own. It seems more like it's a NATO op, which makes you ask, why is NATO running ops for Israel, a country that is not a NATO member?
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to show before we slide on out of here, just because I like to be vindicated. I'm often vindicated. It's one of my things. You know, people say you're wrong, and then I'm like, actually, I was right the whole time. You've experienced this hanging out with me. But like I said, this is a little vindication. Let's get it on. This is Trump. Okay, Donald Trump. You should hear the voice talking about the named president of Syria.
Different topic, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time. But all I can say is that the president of Syria, who I essentially put there, is doing a phenomenal job. He's a rough guy. He's not a choir boy. A choir boy couldn't do it. But Syria is coming together, really coming together well. And thus far, he's been very good to the Kurds. Yeah. Different topic.
You know, I mean, it's just that right there, we're straight up admitting that we put al-Julani, a.k.a. al-Shada now, in power. He named himself president. And, it just brings us to full circle all the way around to the chemical warfare being, carried out by Israel on Gaza, of course, Gaza, and now Lebanon and Syria, which we know about, which we just talked about earlier today. So, again, I think it just goes to this point of the liberal rage is just manufactured by the MSNBC's, mainstream media kind of vibe. And at the end of the day, most people have to acknowledge they don't give a damn about what happens to Syria. They don't care about what happens to Syrians. Another ancient culture. And we talk about none but ancient cultures out here that the United States is trying to destabilize. So all the people who were applauding Assad leaving, oh, yay, you guys are mad. But, Assad was a dictator, this, that, and the third. Well, now you have head chopper in charge who was put in by President Trump, by Turkey, and just sort of exists now as an American puppet, killing Alawites and religious minorities all over the place, horror stories all over Syria. But, he's a rough guy. He's a rough guy.
Yeah, no, that was wonderful. I love that you picked that up because he mentions the Kurds. He didn't say anything about the Alawites. And, let's be honest, even the Kurd thing is a fucking lie. There was a civil war. They have like a tentative ceasefire, but they were fucking decimating the Kurds. A low-level civil war is still going on in Syria. It is not settled, and it's been balkanized, which was exactly the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc. Fables, Foibles, Other American Sins, Tanky's Book of Poetry. So good. I was flipping through it the other day, man. You're such a talented writer. So appreciative of, having you in this space, talking all that radical stuff. We really need it in the poetry world. Link will be in the description. InnerCityLeft.com. Patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. We doing it big. We doing it great. Shout out to y'all. Y'all the real MVPs. Me and TMK, Lil Tanky, everywhere you find music. There's so many great ways to support us. Like, subscribe. If you're on our podcast, make sure to give us a little rating. And, I only say all this type of stuff because we're trying to grow, we're trying to build, and we want to bring this geopolitical news to the forefront, especially from leftists, from a Palestinian and a Black Jewish man and all the intersections that we have. It's important for us to continue to put that out there. We want to do this for a long time. So that's why we need your help. Communism is about helping each other, Tanky. I don't know if you knew that.
It's for the culture.
What do we miss? Some final thoughts, some feelings. What do you got?
Love on your neighbors, man. I read that in a book somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. And free Palestine, and free the Middle East from Western hegemony and all of these snakes in the grass like Julani and, the heads of the Emiratis and the Qataris and the Saudis. And, General President Sisi, who we always need to give a little smoke to. We didn't talk much about Iraq, but, their prime minister, their president is he won an election and they're like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. So I don't want to hear nothing about democracies in the Middle East because Iraq just had an election and they were like, no. So, just keep that in mind. There's plenty of democracy in the Middle East if you're into that kind of thing. So. And Israel's not having elections. So anyway, I digress. Thoughts before you?
No, I mean, that's a great point. Remember always the sovereign wealth of Iraq is held by the New York Federal Reserve. I mean, that's insane. The sovereign wealth of Iraq is held in a New York bank.
Yeah. Pretty unbelievable stuff, man. So anyway, for Amoja Lil Tanky Summer, I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.